Welcome to the Monday, December 29th edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, the birthday edition for me, as it is my 33rd birthday today. The update on how I did on the DraftKings best ball finale as well. Hint, not all that great. I would be a little bit more ecstatic, possibly not on the show if things had went a certain way as well, too. But also getting you set in the Week 18 pickups, our final show of the NFL season here, of course, alongside Jake Letarski, as we have been all season long. You can follow me at Roto. Jake can follow me at JB Fantasy Sports. There's been a few waiver wire pickups. We've talked about this, Jake, now in past shows. If you're in a Week 18 league where the championships are on the line, let's win this thing and then leave. It's ridiculous. Now, thankfully, I think I would frame this. Thankfully, I was looking today. Do teams have incentives to play for? Well, I'm sorry, do players have incentives to play for? But the seeding part of things for the AFC and NFC, while most of the teams are locked up all but two, there is a lot of movement that can still happen. So I'm expecting most teams to play their starters outside of our Packers, might be the only playoff team, for example. And at that point, against this Vikings defense, I'm not sure there's a guy that you want to have recommended. So in reality, our top five waiver wire pickups are probably about teams outside the postseason. And unfortunately, as we're recording this show here early Monday morning, it's a guessing game as to what teams will end up benching their stars. We watched the Tank Palooza happen with the Raiders and Giants. We had no idea Bowers was going to be out, for example, last show. I think more of that could happen. So I'll recommend this to you guys if you're listening to the podcast now or on the YouTube channel. I will have my waiver wire article up later afternoon today. The most important part will be the updates Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday throughout the week as we get more information about who is and who is not playing.
Yeah, so like you said, Joe, I mean, I think I'm in a dozen leagues, and only one of them has any kind of stakes in Week 18, and that's it's purely for points.
Stake League, let's go.
I'm hanging out by a thread. I don't have the tombstone by me yet, so
I do.
Generally, it's inadvisable to play a league where there's any real stake happening in Week 18. But like Joe said, we're going to help you out. We have a handful of suggestions of names that, hey, at the very least, keep listening because they might be good DFS guys to have, guys that are breaking out a little bit. Because if you're really, really paying attention, Week 18 has a lot of DFS opportunities if you're right up there until lock. So if you, for whatever reason, are counting points this week, if some weeks I know do 2-week championships, we're going to have you covered. We're going to skip a little bit of the super in-depth stuff just because we know that's not necessarily the audience this week. But we'll start it off with, some obvious names, then some new names. And then we'll kind of do a little waiver wire awards, if you will. We kind of do our award show at the end of the year saying who were the top pickups by position at each position and what was kind of the strategy to get you there. Like, did we have this right? When did they first hit our radar and why? And, why they were such a good pickup there. But, we'll start by helping your Week 18 efforts a little bit if you're still out there.
No, we're going to start by me flexing my stake league. I was 120 points down 3 weeks ago. Right now, with no Bijan or Puka to play, I am 12 points away from being in the eater spot. This would be a historic comeback of the entire stake league competition. It's been going on at RotoWire for now, at least 15 years. We have one more week to get us home there. And I'm going to have to make a decision between Brock Purdy and Sam Darnold. That one will be very nerve-wracking, but I have been able to rely on Derrick Henry and Brock Purdy. Unfortunately, it would have been great if they could have done this at any other point in the season, but it's been nice to have them the past couple weeks. So we are on Joe Bartel is alive stake league watch here for Week 18. I know, Jake.
I'm only 40-50 points behind, and I was one of the top scorers again this week. All my Chase Brown, my AJ Brown, all these guys are deciding to finally come alive. Even Breece Hall, like these guys that buried me early in the year, are helping out. But yeah, so we'll definitely be playing for something this week. So we're both in it. We got stakes.
Talked about it last week as well, too. I did advance in the best ball $15 million finale last week. We were looking really, really good. I didn't really do a lot of stacks. We've talked about this, Jake, as well throughout like the lead up to draft season that I'm not a huge stack guy. Had a bit of marginal Jaguar stacks and then the Cowboys. So I had Javonte Williams and Jake Ferguson. Can you imagine how ecstatic I was, Jake, in that first 7 minutes of that Cowboys-Commanders game when both Javonte Williams and Jake Ferguson scored touchdowns? And then, as my luck is for all of fantasy, promptly get injured, neither of them play the rest of the game. And I will be very lucky to avoid the very bottom threshold, which is still a nice little Christmas bonus if we want to go it that way. But it was a really, really fun 10 minutes of best ball and then kind of proceed to not look great from there, which kicks off our first waiver wire pickup for today. Malik Davis looked really good. Now it's against the Commanders defense that has not been very successful against the run all season. But we talked about him in past weeks when Javonte Williams initially suffered this injury 3 weeks ago. And I think it's realistic to say it's possible Williams doesn't play. He does have, and I'll jump in here real quick because you might not be aware of this. Javonte Williams does have contract incentives. I think he gets an extra $250,000 if he gets like 75 more rushing yards. But we know that teams could choose to pay that out if it meant that Javonte Williams doesn't have to be banged up and play out one more week.
Yeah, exactly. Will the Cowboys do the right thing? That's an interesting question here that we can pose ourselves here. But yeah, this has been an injury issue for Javonte Williams for multiple weeks now. Of course, he gets knocked out of the game with this shoulder issue, so that's something worthwhile. And in comes Malik Davis, who we've already established he's the backup. Whatever something Jaden Blue did, whatever happened, he's been a healthy scratch most of the season here. Malik Davis is RB2 here. He carried the ball 20 times for 103 yards, so we know he's got that in him. He's got that capability. And the other big thing is they're playing the Giants this week. They're 31 against opposing backs in PPR territory. Now, again, we'll see what happens with this starter situation. This could be, maybe we get a better draft pick. The Cowboys are out of it. We'll see what happens. I don't think they'd completely tank it against the Giants, but they don't have incentive necessarily to trot Williams out, even if he does have some personal incentives. So as we're looking at this on Monday morning, really, it's not even Monday afternoon yet. Out of the top 5 players, that are new names, Malik Davis is 2% rostered in Yahoo formats. He's someone that can be picked up and started easily in any kind of season long or anything where there's points value. And there's even going to be some, I haven't looked at DFS prices yet, but he's someone you'd consider there too.
Yeah, and again, that depends on Javonte Williams being out. I think the expectation right now is that he will, and the Cowboys may be playing for some seeding perspective with their draft pick, multiple draft picks, right, I guess, as part of the Quinn Williams trade, but also the Packers and Micah Parsons trade earlier this year. I think the Cowboys have some draft capital work with Malik. And remember, Javonte Williams is a free agent. He only signed that 1-year deal. If you're the player, is the $250,000 extra bonus if you're playing for it? What is that in relation to having the free agency being ready and healthy and that stuff? So we'll have to see.
Scenario in which he gets his 75 and then Malik Davis takes over and is still productive.
Yeah, that's a very good point as well too. So that's one of those names I think to monitor right away. Luther Burden, who ended up being a really big factor in that best ball $1 million contest that we were talking about earlier, he did get dinged up at the very end of that game. I don't think he ended up getting carted off, but there was significant concern. Okay. Luther Burden did get hurt in the very last play of that game where Caleb Williams doesn't get the ball out there out to whatever receiver it was. But we had reports after the fact, Jake, that it wasn't a serious injury, and we'll have to see his stats here for Week 18. Of course, the Bears have a chance to have the number 2 seed still if they were to beat the Lions next week. And we know the Lions lost their playoff chance on Christmas Day last week with that upset loss to the Vikings. So I don't know if Luther Burden will be available, but the Bears the Bears have plenty to play for, so they might need to have Burden out there, especially if Odunze is still banged up.
Yeah, that's a great point. I actually turned that off and had totally missed the carted off the field option. So thank you for bringing that up here. But leading up to that, Luther Burden looked magnificent. Like, if you watch that game, he was excellent. His routes were crisp. He was his running after the catch ability. There were times where the defender had him dead to rights, and he makes a fantastic cut upfield to get the first down. Like, Luther Burden fully passes the eye test, and of course he's needed.
I agree.
Some opportunity here to open up here. Of course, Olamide Zacchaeus was out. Roma Dunes was out. So, and DJ Moore, he ended up playing 96% of snaps, but he entered with a questionable tag because he was dealing with some illness. There was some stuff going around the Bears locker room this week. So yes, he needed the opportunity to finally show it off. But, and again, we'll have to see what his health is at Week 18. I put him as number 2 on my list to talk about, but obviously that injury could knock him off the list altogether. And then, of course, it does depend a little bit on the remaining Bears options here. And my initial thought was, okay, 22-year-old rookie operating as wide receiver 3, even if they're not playing for something necessarily, he would still be out there, just because of where he stands on the depth chart. But of course we'll see, because they're going to want to use him in the playoffs, want him available healthy for the playoffs. So we'll see what the usage is like. But every bit of the eye test, if there's any, his ownership is only 23%. And I imagine any league with any kind of keeper factor, he's rostered already, but it's worth a check. I'm going to check in one of my leagues that's even already wrapped up to see if I can snag him for $1 keeper. I, as a Packer fan, I'm not looking forward to watching Luther Burden play. for, the next several years. Cause I think he's got it. He's good.
Yeah, I owe some apologies to a few folks, namely Andrew Parr, one of our excellent tech guys at the RotoWire office, but follows college football super closely. And we had plenty of arguments before the NFL draft and even afterwards, saying I don't like the guys whose NFL value is impacted on being able to do stuff after the catch. Because A, you have to have the route running to get open at the NFL level, and B, you then also have to be fast enough and quick enough to actually do that at the NFL level too. I mean, I remember when Kadarius Toney was billed the same way while he was a first-round pick, that he was great after the catch, and that never materialized. Luther Burden looked every bit that part against that Niners defense. Now, Josh Downs looked really good, right, from the Colts 2 weeks ago. Like the Niners defense is just completely ravaged. And I think if we're trying to target maybe some guys on the outside of fringe area, play all your Seahawks next week, right? Because this Niners defense looks absolutely atrocious in a very interesting NFC West contest. But I think Luther Burden absolutely looks the part. I was wrong about him as a prospect, and I think you're right, Jake, to be worried as a Packer fan, because Burden's going to be a very good player for them for a long time. So definitely a good addition here if you're looking to have somebody that has some upside, provided he ends up being healthy. We had talked extensively about the Taysom Hill experience last week and whether or not that was the Saints doing their guy, their veteran, a favor, letting him throw for the touchdown to Chris Olave, getting all those carries, the passing yards. Turns out they did, right? Because Taysom Hill doesn't do anything really in a pretty wild offensive game against the Titans this week. And it was Audric Estime that returned as the number one back for the Saints.
Yeah, the biggest gap in our analysis last week, we were thinking, okay, it would be Audric Estime with maybe a little Evan Hull, and then Taysom Hill goes and plays RB1 for the Saints. What I failed to realize, the big gap in our analysis, was that was the Saints' last home game of the year. And I believe that's about the end of Taysom Hill's contract. So it was going to be the last Taysom Hill game, like at the Superdome here, right? And that's why he got the usage that he did. It was back to business as usual this week, and Audric Estime got 41 snaps, which was 76%, compared to Hull, who played 11 snaps, 20%, and Taysom Hill ends up playing 7 snaps in the whole game, right? So then it's Audric Estime who ends up with 14 carries, 94 yards, and a score, caught his only target. And the matchup this week, I mean, the Saints are on a roll. What have they won? Like 3 in a row? 5 in a row?
I saw today Tyler
5 total, 3 in a row.
Tyler Shuck is the odds-on favorite to win the Rookie of the Year as well, too. Right now, he's at minus 130, which is crazy to say, given he wasn't starting for half the season.
Yeah, 100% here. So they're going to go in there looking to win the game. And Atlanta is they're on the road at Atlanta. They're number 18 against opposing running backs. So it's a plus matchup. So yeah, Estime at only 11% rostered in Yahoo, should be rostered just about everywhere, and he's a plenty startable back. Like if you've been burned by Josh Jacobs or something like that, and I can't trust starting him in week 18. Any of these guys are gonna have a little bit better upside. So Estime checks in at number 3 on my top 5 this week.
Yeah, I don't think Jacobs is going to be available. I don't think Emmanuel Wilson's going to be available. A heavy dose of probably Chris Brooks, I'd imagine, against the first string Brian Flores Vikings defense. Not want to go that direction if you're playing any sort of Vikings. We did have this one correct. We just didn't know the players that would be available. We talked about Quinshon Judkins being out for the Browns. Obviously, has the unfortunate leg injury, done for the year, was going to come back. It sounds like in good health for next season, which is going to be really interesting to see what the Browns do with their extra draft capital with that Jags trade with Travis Hunter. I kind of was in on the idea that it could be Raheem Sanders, who we mentioned on the show. Well, we didn't know that Dylan Sampson was going to be available. He ends up playing in this game and gets the volume you'd want out of a starting running back and was the pass catcher. But remember, the conditions were horrible in Cleveland in that win over the Steelers this week.
Yeah, this was a very interesting backfield split here. Now, Dylan Sampson, he's 29% rostered on Yahoo formats. A lot of that is from, some dead managers from early in the season who were grabbing him as a spec ad when we didn't know about the Judkins situation here. So that affects the ownership percentage here. So there's a lot of availability. After the last 2 weeks, leading up to this week, he wasn't even practicing, let alone on the field. But he returns. He leads the backfield with 11 carries for 27 yards. And he had 18 snaps. That's only 35%. So that's worth noting because Raheem Sanders only carried the ball 8 times for 21 yards, but he had 22 snaps, which is 42%. So Raheem Rocket Sanders actually had more snaps, just a few less carries here than Sampson. So I could see this being a committee here in week 18. And this is significant because they're playing the Bengals, who are number 32 again, dead last against opposing running backs in PPR formats. The Bengals are a matchup you obviously want to target each and every week because that defense, there is no defense out there is the sum of that story here. But yeah, Sampson and Raheem Sanders are actually both interesting. I put Sampson here as the slight lean, but I'm actually pretty sure, in our 14-team stake league, I'm not sure I'm going to find a better flex option than Raheem Sanders on the waiver wire this week necessarily, especially since I'm out of fab dollars. So I'll put a bid for Malik Davis. I'll put in a bid for Estime's already rostered in that league, but chances are I would be okay starting Raheem Sanders this week too, knowing they're going to get a rough split. And I think both will see double-digit carries, and it's against the defense that'll allow it. If Sanders got a touchdown, for example, this week, this would be a very different conversation, and we'd be talking about Sanders at the top of the list.
Mm-hmm.
Something so small that could change this. I put Sampson there because there is pass catching upside. He would theoretically be the pass catching option there. But in watching that game wind down on red zone, Sanders was getting carries towards the end of the game as well. So I think they're viewed relatively equally. And if anything, maybe Sanders has an edge on early down. But they're both worth mentioning because both are pretty widely available, and there's such a glorious matchup here in Week 18.
Yeah, I'm going to probably play Dylan Sampson over Chuba Hubbard and Tonges Spears. I didn't play Sampson over Spears this week, and that difference of 5 points might be what ends up costing me in this miraculous comeback in stake league. So we'll have to see. But I think Dylan Sampson, especially from a pass catching perspective, in the game script probably would dictate that you're seeing the Browns trail, and therefore likely no Harold Fannin as well, the only playmaker on Cleveland. Maybe Dylan Sampson gets funneled more targets or more opportunities for Kevin Stefanski's offense. I think Raheem Sanders can get that opportunity as well too. Real quick, because I guess I'm kind of just thinking overall of the running backs. I don't know what the stats of Devon Achane will be. No, he's not dinged up at all, but the Dolphins really playing from a seeding perspective for their draft pick as well too. Jalen Wright's been quietly getting more involved the past 2 weeks, and it's certainly possible that if you want to say, all right, Achane did fantastic here throughout the season, let's just see what we have from Jalen Wright's perspective. I would throw him in there, and there isn't any contract incentives with Jalen Wright other than to say the Dolphins, who invested a third-round pick in Wright a couple of years ago, it would benefit them somewhat to say, okay, this is what we'll have from a backup perspective. Do we want to have him as part of the rotation? And again, Achane having done as well as he has all year, they're going against the Patriots. Patriots still have a lot to play for in Foxborough, and theoretically you could have the chance of the number 1 seed if the Chargers were to beat the Broncos. But I don't know, again, this is where I go back to. I'll have the article updated throughout the week. Again, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday will be primarily right on the site. And there's no paywall behind it. If the Dolphins say that Achane probably is getting benched for X, Y, and Z reason, does Jalen Wright as the preferred back in Miami, does he become elevated above Malik Davis, for example, as one of the top guys?
I mean, if we find out that he's the preferred back, I would say no, not necessarily, because it's at New England and it's a pretty tough matchup. It's a team that has a lot to play for, and the Malik Davis matchup is a little bit better here. But of course, both of these have a 1A factor, what's going on with Javonte Williams. So it's hard to adequately rank that now. And as long as we're going, to round out running backs, just a reminder, we're not talking about these guys again at length, but Blake Corum, 46%. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's an interesting play this week. You could argue he elevates above all of these guys. Emmanuel Wilson at 36%. If we find out they're resting Jacobs, maybe, but it's a tough matchup against Minnesota. Michael Carter for the Cardinals, 45%. He's essentially RB1 there. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt passed our threshold, 52%. He had another, he scored twice, so there's that. Tyler Algier, 36%. Those guys are all in this conversation as well, and would arguably rank ahead of most of these guys that we're talking about. But again, we don't want to go through these guys, at length, because we've talked about these guys all 3-4 shows apiece. You all, if you've been listening, the situation there, kind of standalone, the handcuffs with standalone value that stay above that only need a small factor or two to change. And, heading into Week 18, however these seedings shake out, it could very well happen.
Raiders made it easy for us to kind of have this conversation when they when they put Brock Bowers and Max Crosby on into reserve. The Max Crosby, does he get trade stats? It'd be very interesting this offseason as a result, but Brock Bowers probably should have been on injured reserve earlier this year. You had Michael Mayer end up getting a ton of volume in a game that the Raiders were uncompetitive against the Giants. Raiders now have the number 1 overall pick locked up as a result of their loss, and Michael Mayer probably has a chance to be, I think, auditioning for another team. Remember, there was rumors the Packers trading for Michael Mayer at the deadline post Tucker Kraft injury. I wouldn't be surprised if the Raiders could get some draft capital out of another good game from Michael Mayer. I think he's also a really talented player. I would rather have Jake Tonges, for example, against the Seahawks if Kittle misses another week, but Michael Mayer probably becomes one of the top available options just overall if you're missing a handful of the tight ends like Harold Fannin, who I've been relying on too.
Yeah, I mean, of course, completely off our radar given the late notice of the Bowers injury here. And I didn't even remember if the Bowers thing was new or if that was just something they're being conservative with. But in any case,
they're just tanking. That's all it was. It was just a tank thing.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. But in any case, Mayer comes out, catches 9 to 10 for 89 yards. That's very, very respectable. I mean, if you used him, if you just straight up grabbed him for Bowers and, in a league you were counting on Bowers, that's a perfectly acceptable output. And he could have very well won you a title here. The problem is, though, most of that was with Geno Smith, and he's got a high ankle sprain and is probably yielding to Kenny Pickett. I don't know if that matters. I still think you'll see a good amount of volume here, but it is a little bit different. And they're also playing the Chiefs, who we know are out of it, but the Chiefs were pretty good against opposing tight ends this year, number 7 overall. So it's a bit of a down matchup and a different quarterback. So just raising a couple of flags with our cover boy, but yeah, you're right. And you mentioned Tonges, very interesting here. Mm-hmm. But it sounded like on Sunday night that Kittle was close to playing and maybe could have played if it were a playoff game. So I'm not necessarily sure I have the same outlook for Tonges. I remember watching that thinking, we got to talk about Tonges, the way Purdy looks at him. But again, that was a total shootout of a game. And, you see Kittle walking around on the sidelines. I bet he would have gone if the stakes were a little bit higher there. I think
it was, they know that week 18, the stakes were going to be so high, with now this being a similar situation last year with the Lions and Vikings. You win the NFC West, and you also win the number 1 seed in the NFC overall. Having Kittle available for that game, he got dinged with the, I always call, at least Mario and I do in the Friday Series XM show, the dreaded low high ankle sprain, right? Like I hate that, how that gets used so often now in the NFL, and it's very frustrating. But they know if they say high ankle sprain, it means your guy's out, and that's bad news. But if you say it's a low high, then it's somehow fine. I don't know. I think Kittle is one of the tougher tight ends in the league, and it will matter next week against the Seahawks. So I think he will be available, whether he should be out there or not. 2 other ones that I'll just add to the article list here, again, getting posted later today. I went through, you and I love talking about this, and I think it matters DFS-wise. People who have literal money, some incentives on the line to perform well, to do stuff. So I think Hollywood Brown needs to either get a touchdown or 70 yards receiving, and he'll get an extra $300,000. Now, Chiefs in a really tough spot overall with their 3rd-string quarterback. It's been a really defunct offense, ready through for just over 100 yards, despite being a game script that would have been favorable. They do play the Raiders, though. The Chiefs play the Raiders next week. So if there's ever a time where maybe you could force feed a touchdown to Hollywood Brown, that's interesting. Again, if you're in a full point PPR league at 7 points, just knowing that this guy gets $300,000. So Hollywood Brown getting 1 touchdown, I think that's interesting. Then Keenan Allen also needs something like 60 yards receiving to get another $300,000 to $250,000 as well. And I think the Chargers, who have a lot to play for against the Broncos this week from a wild card seeding perspective, that will be I think that was a catalyst a little bit this past week to get you halfway home on Keenan Allen, but Allen likely going to get that spot as well too. And I would imagine in the most diamond leagues, like you refer to them, Jake, Allen has been dropped in a lot of places because he's been so frustrating recently. So Keenan Allen, Marquise Brown, 2 guys that I think will be guaranteed, let's just say 7 PPR points if they're to meet the financial thresholds that are currently set in their contracts.
Yeah, exactly. And the other names that I jotted down here, tight end wise, technically Colston Loveland, Juwan Johnson, those guys are under our threshold. Those are perfectly serviceable streams this week. And then last week's cover boy, Parker Washington, went out and had a pretty good he had a pretty solid game, another 100-yard effort here. So he's doing something for Jacksonville. And then with the Patriots, Mac Hollins went on IR. Kayshon Boutte was out with a concussion. He might be back, but if you're looking for another name, Kyle Williams could maybe get in the fold here, depending on what that personnel grouping looks like.
Yeah, we needed Kyle Williams to do better for my DraftKings best ball team. Unfortunately, it didn't happen, even though the Patriots score 42 and bench Drake May midway through the 3rd quarter. Speaking of DraftKings, let's get a word from them.
The NFL postseason is almost here, and playoff best ball on DraftKings is back. It's your home for playoff best ball. And this year, it's bigger than ever because our partners at DraftKings are featuring a massive $3 million prize pool and a $1 million top prize in DraftKings' largest contest to date. Are you new to playoff best ball? Well, it's the easiest way to get involved in the playoff action without the weekly grind. Just draft once, and that's it. Each round, your top scores automatically count. That means no roster moves, no weekly management. Just build your squad and let it ride all postseason long. All you have to do is download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app and draft your playoff best ball lineup for a shot at the $1 million top prize. Drafts stay open until the postseason kicks off, so now's the time to jump in. You draft it, we crown it. So sign up now using the link in the episode description below to take your shot at $1 million in DraftKings' biggest playoff best ball contest ever. Gambling problem? call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY at 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-78-97-777 or visit ccpg.org. 18 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See terms at DraftKings.com. Sponsored by DraftKings.
All right, we're back in the Week 18 Waiver podcast, the final one of the NFL season for Jake and I. And Jake, I've been flexing the birthday muscles here. I've allowed you to kind of have the whole strategy of what we're doing for the podcast today. So what's next in the docket after we've kind of identified a lot of the obvious top waiver pickups?
Yeah, so we got all your pickups in. Let's quick run through just our awards, right? This is our last show together this season, our last show of 2025. It's been awesome, but we'll quick recap, what went well, like by position, who were guys that were pickups that made a real difference on your fantasy team, and we'll try to get in a little bit of the strategy behind them so you can apply that to next year here. And of course, we start with the quarterbacks, and there's no more of an obvious waiver wire award winner than Matthew Stafford. And believe it or not, QB 25 in ADP. But right now here, before Monday Night Football even happens, he's QB 5 overall.
Wow.
And chances are he'll be QB 3 here. He's only 11 points behind Trevor Lawrence, believe it or not, who could also sneak in for this award. So he'll be QB 3 through 17 weeks, which is wild. And to honest, the strategy behind that, for me, like, he started slow because 2 of the first 3 weeks he was under 15 points playing Houston and Philly, who turned out to be the best defenses of the year. So, week 4 and 5 is when you kind of had to identify him going nuts on Indy and San Francisco. And, from then on out, it was multiple touchdowns pretty much every single week. From week 7 on, it was 2 or more touchdown passes in every single game. And also, 30.88 points against Seattle in the fantasy championship week. Matt Stafford's the clear winner there. Honorable mention wise, I almost put Drake May in there, but he was QB 15.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to really include him. I also wanted to honorable mention, he wasn't great in the championship week, but Jacoby Brissett had 23.7
good one
points per game from week 6 through 17. So he turned into be a very, very reliable option there. Those are the QB award winners.
Stafford definitely, I think, has to be the headliner for this. I was thinking Sam Darnold at various points this year was right up there. Now he's fallen off a little bit, wasn't great against the Panthers. I think he'll do just fine against the 49ers if you really need to be a spot start quarterback in week 18. And then Tyler Shuck as well, too, since he's taken over as the starting quarterback. I think he's been in the quarterback 1 fringe range now each of the past 3 weeks. Again, the Saints have a pretty nice week 18 end. And right now, Tyler Shuck, the odds-on favorite for the Rookie of the Year winner, too. So pretty crazy that we're talking about this. I mean, I liked Lawrence a lot entering this year. I liked Drake May to a certain extent. Didn't get enough exposure from him in best ball or redraft, but I liked those guys. The idea was I was fading the top outside of Lamar Jackson. We had our one share of Joe Burrow in the NFFC where 6 points per passing touchdown, but I didn't really want to draft much Josh Allen. I had a little bit of Jalen Hurts mixed in. I don't know if I'm changing my strategy about the elite quarterbacks, but identifying the guys that can make big differences. We've always said it's the rushing floor. Here's the Kyler Murrays, the Justin Fields, for example. Daniel Jones at one point would have probably been as a waiver wire article winner too, waiver wire show winner too. But if you can have a guaranteed touchdowns, just passing wise, like Stafford has been able to do this year, that does have value, even in a 4-point per passing touchdown league. So it'll be very interesting. I think that the takeaway, and I had this conversation with Brian Drake, who works for Fantasy Points on the SiriusXM Angel Fire radio show that I do 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on Saturdays, Channel 87. I thought Brian said it really good, and I'll kind of just quote him on this. I want to get involved with offensive coordinators that are good. Ben Johnson, Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur, if we wanted to go that direction. I'm not going to be speculating on your Kevin Petulus or new situations that might change. Let's just stick with the status quo that we know, because it seems like they almost get penalized fantasy-wise because we know what the same old is. So if there is one way to react to that, if we're kind of learning lessons on what these waiver wire quarterbacks end up being, having comfort in the quarterbacks in offensive situations that we know to be successful, I think Liam Cohen probably could be in that category now as well too, the Buccaneers and of course head coach for the Jags. That's one of those I'm going to be monitoring as well too. So let's get to the running back awards. Jake, who do we have for this year?
Yeah, so this was a little bit tougher. There were no real big standouts. First, just to recap, last week we talked Raheem Sanders, Tajay Spears, Jordan. This week, we got your usual suspects. If you're fast forwarding to the running back section, looking for names, Malik Davis, Audric Estime, Dylan Sampson, Raheem Sanders are your names to look for. But looking to the awards, first, I almost went Rico Dowdle, which was really close because ADP 165, RB 56. He was right on the fringes of getting drafted. He finished as RB 16, which is great, but that was due to a couple big weeks, and he sort of killed you in the playoffs with 6.3 and 7.8 fantasy points here in the semis and the finals. So where I ended up landing was Kenneth Gainwell of the Steelers, someone that we were mentioning very early on, and it turned out to not be fluky, those early season performances. He was 288 in ADP, RB 134, so he was way down there. He finished as RB 21, and while he didn't have an outstanding fantasy finals, he definitely got you there because he had 13.2, 16.1, and 21.3 fantasy points in weeks 14 through 16 to carry you to playoff pushes. So he had plenty of useful games early and helped get you to the title game down the stretch. So Kenneth Gainwell takes the waiver wire trophy this year over Rico Dowdle. Kamani Vidal gets an honorable mention because he would have helped your Amari and Hampton owners during that stretch in which he was out. And then, of course, you can't really use him for the playoffs. So he had a good look in there. But overall, a tough week for running back, or a tough year for running back.
Exactly.
There was a whole lot of streaming, on a week-to-week basis. You had to be really active on the wire. Hopefully you were tuned in with us. But if there is one name that you picked up early on, probably kept rostered, and then helped you down the stretch, it's Kenneth Gainwell.
Well, let's give credit to our guy, Jim Coventry, who probably his hottest take entering the NFL season right back to July and August was that the running backs that we thought would be injury prone, Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, they weren't going to get hurt. In fact, not many running backs are going to get hurt because the way that you're playing the NFL 20 years ago when there's 250-pound linebackers who are all coming at you full speed, everything just is hitting less impactfully from the strength of those linebackers. They're a lot faster, but the power isn't behind it, and the running backs are getting bigger too. So I think Jim had said it really best, and a lot of people in the fantasy community kind of poo-pooed him, but you look at how healthy a lot of these running backs became, and by default, our show every Monday doing waiver wire pickups, we struggled to identify some on a week-to-week basis that would be obvious. I think it's because the running backs have stayed healthier. So if I'm going to take away from that, much we're doing the quarterbacks, let's not guarantee these guys that are injury prone or we think they could be injured that'll just necessarily happen, because I do think the NFL, the way we're playing it right now, is just not quite as big hittery, and why these running backs kind of withstand things a little bit more. Before we move over to the receivers, Jake, let's get a word from our sponsors, Dabble. I guess let's get a word for Dabble here. Dabble isn't just another DFS app. It's the ultimate social platform where you can connect with other fantasy sports lovers, and Dabble lets you win big because you can win 5,000 times your money this football season. Starting with Dabble is super easy. New users get $25 free when signing up and no deposit necessary. Check out the link in the episode description down below to download Dabble today. All right, getting to the receiver waiver wire awards. I think a few more guys are at least a little bit interesting here for this season, Jake.
Yeah, so again, like the running backs, there was a guy I was leaning towards at the beginning, but I ended up going another direction here. Also, just to recap, if you're fast forwarding to this part of the show to hear wide receiver pickups, Luther Burden was the guy we talked about. Watch his health. He passed the eye test, looked great. Parker Washington, another 100-yard game here. You always got your Troy Franklins of the world. And with Mac Hollins on IR and Keyshawn Boutte out with a concussion, who may be back, Kyle Williams is also interested. And you also mentioned in the contract incentives section that Keenan Allen and Hollywood Brown are both possible options for Week 18. But jumping ahead to the waiver wire award winners here, almost went Wan'Dale Robinson. After the Malik Neighbors injury, he really kind of emerged. He was ADP 152, wide receiver 61. So he was right on the fringes of being drafted, I guess. He finished as wide receiver 13 and had 16.8 fantasy points in championship week. So that's very respectable. He could have taken this award. But honestly, the one big one that really deserves it is Michael Wilson of the Cardinals.
Bingo.
We mentioned Jacoby Brissett in the quarterback section here. Michael Wilson was the main beneficiary of that and, really excelled when Marvin Harrison went down here. You got Trey McBride out there breaking the tight end single season reception record, but you got Michael Wilson producing right alongside him. He was wide receiver 76, 227 overall in NFC ADP. He finished as wide receiver 16, and he didn't even really come on until late. In the last 7 weeks, he averaged 21.3 PPR points per game. Massive. He had 5 touchdowns in the last 4 games, and 19.9 PPR points in championship week here. Michael Wilson is the clear-cut waiver wire, winner pickup. A lot of people won leagues because they grabbed him down the stretch, and he continued to produce. He's been solid, and was very worthy of this award.
I'll add one more. It's close to home, but Christian Watson in your leagues that don't have IR or injured stashing availability. I think Christian Watson was widely available because you and I, as Packer fans, devout Packer fans, didn't expect him to be available when he did, and ends up putting together a great end of the season, whether it was Jordan Love, whether it was Malik Willis. I think, Jake, at this point, you could have been throwing touchdown passes to Christian Watson. It had been a great end of the year for him, and he's now jumped into the conversation where I might be buying into Christian Watson as like a 4th or 5th round target next year, depending on what the schedule looks like and where we're at with that. Because I have a lot of faith in how the Packers and Matt LaFleur have been using Christian Watson. So Michael Wilson, Christian Watson, I believe probably 2 of the top lists. We could have Wan'Dale. We could make a real life team. This Wan'Dale Robinson's our slot receiver of this, and I think you have Christian Watson, Michael Wilson on the outside. I'm really liking this as well too. Yeah. So
I don't know about round 4 or 5 for Watson with the injury history, and there's a little bit of game log volatility. He kind of hurt you in weeks 15 and 16, but he did really kill it in championship week and in weeks. Basically, he got you into the playoffs week 13 and 14. Hurt you if you stuck with them. Then if you had him in championship week, it was awesome. That touchdown was right in our end zone on Saturday night too. I had the perfect line of sight of the Malik Willis ball.
Oh, yeah, the perfect line of sight. Derrick Henry just annihilating this pathetic defense. That was a lot of fun.
When we were still optimistic on Saturday night, right in our end zone. That was a beautiful ball, beautiful grab by Watson. But yeah. No, he certainly deserved a spot and could have definitely won you a couple weeks. He would have been a great best ball type of guy, right? And that's kind of what he is next year. He should probably be drafted 2 or 3 rounds earlier in best ball, knowing you can capture his boom games and not have to put up with the 3 catches for 30 yards games.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's kind of the Matt LaFleur special and MO, the way the Packers offense has been. We'll have to see. I'm not expecting much how we have seen on the 3-game skid and probably 4-game skid with the Vikings loss in week 18. I'm not expecting much of the Packers in the postseason. So I like that one. Christian Watson, Michael Wilson, Wan'Dale Robinson, our top waiver wire receivers of the year. Tight end's going to be really interesting because I think Harold Fannin has to be in that mix. He was an often discussed guy, at least from a dynasty perspective, probably has his rating a little bit higher. What was your overall thoughts on the tight end to win the waiver wire award for us this year?
Well, first off, real quick, if you're fast forwarding, obviously, you got our cover boy Michael Mayer taking over for Brock Bowers. He's a solid stream. He was this week. He will be week 18. And then your usual suspects, Colston Loveland, AJ Barner even had a shot. Juwan Johnson still solid here.
Yeah, Juwan Johnson, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's been solid. He almost took the waiver wire award portion of this. First, I looked into Kyle Pitts because we had written him off from fantasy, right? But he just misses our cut. He was ADP 142, tight end 15. So he was largely getting drafted, even if it was as a second tight end. And right behind him, Dallas Goedert in ADP. He was ADP 157, tight end 16. Both of those guys, Pitts finished as tight end 2 going into week 18, and Goddard's tight end 3. Believe it or not, he's had some pretty big games there. So guys that were way down, but still being drafted. One guy that wasn't on the radar at all that is taking my award this year from the tight end spot is Harold Fannin of the Browns. He was ADP 274, tight end 35. He was on our radar in Showtime early. We were talking about him getting more routes and an equal amount of snaps as Njoku, and then Njoku went down. And Fannin really proved to be not just tight end 1, but wide receiver 1 for the Browns. If he's going to finish at about tight end 5, he had a big game, 21.4 fantasy points in week 14 to secure your playoff bids, 17.5 in the semis, 10 in the title game. And obviously there's a little bit of a keeper aspect too. He might not help you week 18 because of the injury. You'll have to watch that. A little bit of a keeper bonus if you took a shot, but Harold Fannin, as far as someone going completely off the radar, someone that had to be picked up, he was the guy. And then the honorable mention, as we alluded to, Juwan Johnson. He was ADP 258, tight end 30, just ahead of Fannin. He finished as tight end 10 and, 13 points in the semis, a dozen in the finals here. Juwan Johnson graduated from being a touchdown-only flyer to a consistent pass-catching option, for the New Orleans Saints here. So, those were your guys, Fannin and Juwan Johnson. If you punted them or missed during the year, those were the guys that carried it and brought you home.
Probably our two best calls, because I think we were early in on Harold Fannin. We talked about Rondé Gadsden probably early as well too, and Gadsden has been waffling in that range. But Juwan Johnson was a guy that I've been pounding the table on basically right away at the beginning of the season when we had more information of what the Saints' offense would look like. There were points where Juwan Johnson dipped, but I think Harold Fannin, Juwan Johnson, probably the two clearest of the waiver wire pickups that we were the most right on early enough relative to the rest of the fantasy community too. So I think those are the right calls. And again, I don't think Harold Fannin plays this week. He had aggravated that groin injury that had him that he had suffered on Friday's practice. Did end up playing, scores the touchdown. At least that was good. Doesn't do anything else in that Steelers game. Was removed shortly after there too. So before we get to the defenses and streamer options and just kind of what you're looking at for week 18, I did want to get one final word from our sponsors here from Playoff Blitz. All right, check this out. If you're like us and hate when fantasy season ends before the real football gets really good, you've got to try the PlayoffBlitz.com. It's fantasy football built for the NFL playoffs. No drafts, no waivers, no sweat. Members pick one lineup each week from the playoff teams, and you can only use each player once. So you start a player, you just lose him after that. That's why the strategy kicks in after that point. So remember, no need to hold a draft. Just create a league with your friends and invite them. And of course, starting a league is always easy. It takes less than a minute, and you're all in for the wild card weekend to the Super Bowl. PlayoffBlitz.com is your home for playoff fantasy football. And leagues are $79 right now, and you can invite as many people as you like. Run an office league, invite league mates from your regular season leagues, or even your grandma's bingo league. I don't care. Whatever. Join today at PlayoffBlitz.com, where fantasy football meets the Super Bowl. Enter promo code ROTO Wire for a discount on your league today. Let's also get a word from our sponsors, Blue Wire. All right, we're back, Jake, and again, just kind of talking about the defensive streamer options for Week 18 if you're in one of those leagues. And I guess if you want to put a little bit of a bow on our picks from the very beginning of the year, I think I end up being right around 500. I could go 16 and 14 on the total records from what I looked last week. I don't know if you quite had as good of a year as you did last season. I don't want to put you under the ground too much in that. You had an insane year last year. It would have been really hard to replicate that once again.
Yeah, we knew that wasn't going to happen. There was going to be a course correction there. Even the best bets faltered a little bit here. Normally, at least I'm money on those, but the Bucks choked it away. I had the Bucks over 9.5. That's not going to work. The Rams under obviously looks pretty silly in hindsight. I did not expect the Stafford resurgence here, but at least we got the Chargers over 9.5. Something that we kind of saw correctly there. So. Not the greatest for the team total over-unders, but you know what? We'll be back at it next year. And, if even with a really bad year this year, I'm pretty sure if you combine the last 2 years, I'm well over 500. So
I think you're well over 600. Yeah, well over 600.
Yeah, right on. So, that's a slightly unfortunate end, but, we'll come back. We'll be back stronger. We'll be ready to roll.
For sure. And then I guess I'm looking at it's so tough. And again, talk about the streamers for week 18. If you're playing one of those leagues, you would like the teams that have something to play for to be able to be motivated. But for example, like we've been picking on the Raiders all season. I don't want to play the Chiefs when they have nothing to play for. Draft strategy wise makes no difference. I think the Bears, possibly whatever the Lions choose to do, if Jared Goff is out there or not, again, Bears being an opportunistic defense, maybe they're not available as well too. Texans you're running with as you would imagine. The Colts are playing Riley Leonard, but Texans are one of the top ones out there. Honestly, Titans offense is really good. Do you want to play the Jags this week? Like I don't know if I really want to.
No,
the Jags
not really.
Have plenty on the line.
I almost look at the Vikings. They're home against the Packers. And if the Packers end up resting starters, because I don't think they can really improve much from the 7th seed.
They're stuck there.
And if Love and Jacobs all sit, the Vikings are a pretty tough defense to begin with. And if they face the Packers at home, the Vikings are still. There's a point of pride at this point, right? And it's still the Packers, regardless of what the stakes are here. And I mean, the Vikings are coming off a 21-point week against the Lions, obviously making Goff cough the ball up so many times. I think they're only 38% rostered. The Vikings would be my pick for the streaming defenses this week. I don't really see an option that's better than that. That's below 50%. I'm not touching the Cowboys, Falcons, Titans, Colts. They had none of that. It's unless we find out by surprise somebody's going to rest starters and you've got a home team and a low over-under to go to, I think you're honestly picking on the Packers this week.
Yeah, the Vikings are the right call. I don't mind the Bengals if Harold Fannin is out for the Browns, although that feels like a really tough ask with how bad the Bengals defense has been.
That's a funny. Yeah. I can't get on board with that.
All right, that does it for us here on the Week 18 Waiver edition, the birthday edition for me. I guess just singularly the Bartel family had some great news probably 5 minutes before we started. Bartel number 2 will be here in July, and we found out just minutes before the show that it'll be a boy. So very excited to have a household of crazy children. It will be a little bit different schedule, I imagine. Next year, we did just fine 4 years ago when my son was first born. It'll be a little bit different here with Bartel number 2 on the horizon. But it's been awesome to be with you guys throughout the whole year. Jake, it's been great specifically to work with you. You've done a great job getting all this podcast stuff prepped, and you'd come prepared to the extent that I think everyone gets a lot of valuable information out of this, and that's all we can ask for. So as just a humble host, Jake, it's been awesome to do this show with you, as we have now for over a half decade now at this point. It is one of my favorite shows, and I do a lot throughout the year, but you make it a lot of fun for me, Jake, and the audience as well, participating in the comment section on Twitter, JB Fantasy Sports, at RotoJake, if you guys want to reach out for Week 18 stuff too. It's been fun to be a part of your season, and it's why I think this continues to be one of my favorite jobs and my dream job that I've had for as long as I can. So thank you guys. Thank you, Jake, for making this be what it is, and we'll be back again next season to get you guys set for more waiver wire stuff. So appreciate you all for listening.